We're speaking with Ilona Haendel. It's December 23rd, 1997 in San Antonio, Texas. Mrs. Haendel, when we left the last tape, you were speaking of the body that you saw on the street with a sign on it. What did the sign say again?
The sign said, "This will happen to everybody who's trying to help those stinking Jews." And they let him lie there on the... And what they were doing is were walking the people from the protected houses into the ghetto.
In what month was this in 1944?
Probably November, end of October or November.
And you mentioned the word protected house. What is that?
Well, it was a movement started by Wallenberg, who worked at the Swedish embassy, and who came to Budapest specifically to save the few Jews that were still alive, and they were only in Budapest. All the rest were carried away during the summer. And he came up with this idea to give the Jews like a letter of laissez-passer, and it said that people who has this letter are considered to be under the protection of the Swedish embassy. And then the Swiss embassy followed suit, and they sent out those letters too. The first one was the real ones, because my brother sent papers for us from Israel.
Now, your brother was not with you at
My
this
brother
time.
was in Israel. He went in 41 through dry land. You couldn't go by ship anymore because everything was no? Those water, the bombs in the water, what you call those mines? Yeah. It was mine. So they took them around on dry land through Turkey. And why he went? Because he wanted to. He was 16. He came home one day and said, "I'm going to Israel." And my parents were, "What you mean you're going to Israel?" Well, he said, I want to go. I don't want to stay here. And my mother said, "You will be homesick." So he said, "I have stuff with me. I'm taking with me those newspaper articles. You know, you want to know how did we feel it?" He said, "I'm going to take all these newspaper articles with me, and when I feel homesick, I'm just going to read it." There was an article in the paper, I remember, that the Humane Society put in, asking people to take care of the dogs and the cats that the Jewish people left behind. You know, like the Jewish people went away on a real nice vacation and they left their dogs and cats unattended.
So your brother went...
So my brother went to Israel, was in to an agricultural school. He was only 16. And when he was 17, he volunteered into the British Army. And he said he was 18. And they took him.
Now you say he sent you some papers?
He sent papers, and the Swiss embassy was representing what was Palestine at the time. So it went for us to come to Israel.
Describe the papers that he sent to you.
I don't know. It all went to the Swiss embassy, and in turn they gave us this protective letter saying that we are on a Swiss passport.
Okay. So did you receive a lot of letters or just one letter?
I just received one, but when I read it, it seemed like a good idea to try to get some more for the family members. So I went to the Swiss embassy, They wouldn't let me in. Just somebody came to the gate, that's what I wanted. And I said I wanted some. I received this one and I wanted some more from the family. So they said I should come back like 2 days down the road. And I went back. It was no fun walking the streets, not only being Jewish and being found out, but bombs were flying very. During the day, we had the United States planes bombarding huge areas, and at night we had the Russians bombarding. So we didn't pay attention. We were not afraid of that. We were more afraid of. So I went back there, and by that time there were a lot of people outside, and they brought out those letters and read off the names, and then they gave it to me. And I would go back almost every day. Some days I had this bad feeling I didn't want to go out, and I didn't. And some days I just said, I have to, even if I'm in danger. And one of my friends, some people moved in to the embassy. And I didn't want to move into the embassy. It was just too crowded. People lived in the basements all over the place. It was a glass house. There was a very rich Jewish family who left the country, of course. They found a way out. But they left this building there for the Swiss embassy to use. Well, anyway, this friend said, you know, you're coming here every single day. Do you have a typewriter? And I said, yes, I do. So he said, take all these things and you write in the names and you don't have to come back here every day. And one day when I was standing there, we heard a big explosion. The Germans blew up all, you know, Donau, I told, the Danube flows through Budapest. They blew up all the connecting bridges. There were no more bridges left because they wanted to retreat toward the west, to Buda. And the Russians came in on the Buda side and surrounded them. So they really had no place to go. They just blew up those bridges because they expected the Russians to come from the east. And so they wouldn't be able to follow them. They blew up the bridges, but then they came up from the west. They really surrounded the city.
And do you remember the date that you were given all of these papers from the Swiss embassy?
The date? No.
The month?
October. That was in October. Or at the very end of September.
And the papers or the pages that you were given, you said they were blank. Did they have anything on them?
The print. I mean, it looked the same, the one I have, which is an original. There was no difference. And these Germans were going nuts because they knew that couldn't be that many of those letters out. But they couldn't make out the difference. So there was no difference.
So the top of these blank pages had what on them?
Oh, the same text that I had. The person carrying this letter considered to be under the protection of the Swiss embassy and a member of a common passport and should be looked upon as Swiss citizens. Couldn't be any better.
And how many of these were you given?
Oh, who knows? A whole lot.
Were there 100?
Probably 100 or even more. I know that I worked getting it into the typewriter, writing the names in. And one of my cousins, I was too late. They took him away before I got it to him. And he was beaten to death. He was 16 years old. beautiful, beautiful child.
What was his name?
Looked very much like you. Lang Endre. Had dark hair and big blue eyes. Great sense of humor. And they were buried, the place, they were not killed by Germans, they were killed by, they were retreating. And somehow they stopped in a village, and the kids opened the back door of this cart that they took them, the cattle cart, and they ran. And the few, so they didn't have too many people taking, guarding them. They were, and they didn't know the area. So the peasants of this village got their shovels, their pitchforks, that whatever, and hunted down those kids. They were hiding in the fields, in the cornfields, and they beat them to death. And people who brought the good news told us that 3 days later, the ground was still moving where they buried them. So it seems they were not all dead. And after the occupation was over, and in the spring, they brought them back to Budapest and buried them in a common grave and put a big sign up with the names.
Do you remember the names of some of the people who you typed?
Yeah, I wrote them down. That was my mother's uncle, one of them, that he was with us almost to the end. And that letter saved his life. My cousin and my cousin's mother. And there were others, other uncles and aunts, that I got them the letters, but it didn't help them at all. Mostly the Lang family, and then the Deutsches, the name spelled the same as the CIA, Deutsch. But I don't think they are related. I don't remember if I had any for my friends. I probably did. There are lots of things that at the time it was so intense. I have to save this person and write it fast and do it before they are taken away. So I think I got some for our neighbors. Their name was Elias. And in turn, when it was time to go to the protected house, somebody asked them to move in with them, and in turn they asked us to move in with them. By that time it was just my mother and me. And my mother in turn said, I have to take my sister with me, and I have to take my uncle with me. So we ended up 12 people sleeping in a room about this size here. 12. Two of them there were 2 beds in the room. So there were 2 elderly persons. We told them to sleep in the bed, and we camped on the floor, 10 of us. So if one of us stretched a little too much, would kick the other one in the head. And then we set the guys to go outside, and the women would go to sleep. unrelated people, unrelated 12 people in one small room. And then in the morning we went to the kitchen, we tried to cook something. And I am very picky about cleanliness. And I think when I was young, I was even more so. And I couldn't touch anything in that kitchen. Not only because of kosher, but it was dirty. It was really bad. And then in the same building, there were people who didn't have a room. If these people didn't invite us to come in with them, there were people in the hallways, and I mean hallways, open hallways. It was cold. And people in the basement. And I don't know how many rooms were in the apartment that we were at. I just know that the people that were outside came in to go to the bathroom, and there was only one bathroom. And there was an everlasting line there. And then they brought out this big pot, it's like a vat, from the laundry room, where they used to boil the laundry. And they put it in the middle of the courtyard, and people donated. Somebody had a carrot, and somebody had a potato, and they cooked a soup in that. And people were lining up to get some soup with them. And my uncle, who was such a spoiled brat, that if somebody just said a bad word around, I mean not a real bad word like they are saying now, but something around the table, he would stop eating. He couldn't eat anymore. And here he is in line getting that. And my mother was crying, look at him, look at my brother in line for that soup. And he was very tall and very skinny. And I dare say that he stayed alive thanks to that protective ladder. And his wife and his son. They went through a lot, but stayed alive.
You mentioned a few family members and other people, but you said there were over 100 letters, so you were...
I probably just gave it to anybody and everybody that came by. There was a Klein family in the building. I remember writing one for them, each of them.
So you were personally responsible for probably saving the lives of over 100 people?
I never thought about it like that.
Why did you do it?
I just did it. It had to be done. It's just, you know, you talk to this woman who saved our life and you ask her, weren't you scared? And she says, of course I was scared. But it just had to be done. And most of the survivors, did you see that exhibit at the Whitney Museum? Most of those people said, we didn't do anything, we just did what had to be done.
This was an exhibit of who?
Of the pictures, portraits.
Of rescuers?
Yeah. And one of them said, would we do it again? The question was, would you do it again? And they said, I don't know. And then the wife and the husband looked at each other and they said, of course we would. So, you know, within all these animals, there were some, I really shouldn't offend the animals calling these people animal, but there were good people there, just were not enough of them.
And this was in October of 1944?
Yeah.
What happened next?
Oh, we were just a few days in that protected house. And instead of the Jewish star, they had a Swiss emblem on the gate. And saying that this building under the protection and all that. And all of a sudden, my cousin appeared, who was also with that work detail in the military, someplace in the Ukraine. And his feet froze. He was barefoot. His shoes were off. So they put him in a hospital, in a military hospital, where he was the only Jew. So they didn't bother, separate him or write on his papers that he's a Jew. And when he got better, they gave him some leave to a certain date. And he came back and he found us in that protective house. And sometimes he slept there, and sometimes he just came. He was walking around in uniform, so it was kind of, but he had a nice Jewish nose. And his name was Stern. It's not a very Hungarian name. But I would go out with him. I felt safe with him because he was a uniform. And then one day, he wasn't, during the day he didn't stay with us, he just came and went. Some people like that were saving Jews just by taking them with them. They had some uniform, and but of course you never knew where you were safe. And then the soldiers came in to the apartment where we were, and they said, "Do you have a typewriter?" And they scared the daylight out of me. I thought they looking for somebody who was, they asked for those that protective letter, whether we have a right to be there. And at the same time they asked for the typewriter. Thinking is they found out that I wrote some of those. And I didn't dare to say, no, we don't have. I said, yeah, we have a typewriter. So he grabbed it and took it. And then they declared that they really couldn't see the difference, which one was a real one, which one was a falsified. It wasn't falsified, it's just that I was waiting that they're going to see the typewriter, but they didn't have that much sense. And they said to line up by 4, and walk. They all false. Okay.
How many people were in the protected house at that time?
Lots.
Do you know?
Lots. It was a big building, like 5-story building with large apartments, plus the people in the basement and in the hallways. And hundreds. It was a long, long line.
And these were German soldiers?
No, Hungarian. And they made us walk to a park on the building was on the shore of the Danube, and there was a park not far. And they made us walk there, and then they cut the line in the middle, 2 this way, 2 that way. They knew that 4 people who belonged together would want to be together, so they knew how to separate us. And they took my uncle and aunt to the right, and we went to the left.
We meaning?
My mother and I.
Where was your father?
And it's my father was taken away a lot earlier than that. Just right after the Germans came in.
Where was he taken?
Probably in the spring or in the summer. They took him to the Russian front. But that was a military operation. So, we always, I was engaged to a guy. They took him in, I think it was in 40. I never saw him again.
What was his name?
Balogianos, B-A-L-O-G and J-A-N-O-S. That's a very Hungarian name.
So they divided the two of you. Your aunt and uncle went in one line and you and your mother
And
went in the other.
we went to the left toward the blown up bridges, and they had rebuilt part of the bridge from, wasn't very stable. We walked through there, and then we went up to the part of the bridge that was still there. And I'm no big hero right now either. I was very skinny, was carrying this huge backpack, another side bag with food in it. And I was very tired by that time when I came to the other side. In the middle of the bridge, a former classmate came across me.
Across you, meaning coming the other
Coming
way?
from the other way.
So
Seems like she just escaped of something.
There were two lines going in different directions?
No, she was all by herself. And I was just praying, don't talk to me, and I shouldn't talk to her, that whatever she's up to, let her do it. And so we walked by each other, just looking at each other, and didn't say a word. I met her after the war. And when we were on the other side already, they told us to take a 5-minute rest, which was great. We put down the backpacks and not the food. And I told my mother, I'm so tired. I'm not going to walk through this thing. We were walking toward Vienna. And on the border somewhere there was a brick factory. And that's where they stored the Jews. And I told my mother, and these girls that were walking with me, the people that we stayed in the same room, kept on telling me, hurry up, let's get there early so we get a good place in the brick factory. Oh, I don't want a good place in the brick factory. I don't want to go to the brick factory. And I told my mother, when we start walking again, don't pick up that backpack. Leave it where it is. Let's very slowly get away from it. And my mother said, my wedding ring is in there. And this ring, she hid it in some darning yarn. She said, if I can get it out of there, we escape. If I can't get it out of there, I take it. So that's what our life depended on. She found it. I was lucky.
Let's stop there and we'll continue when we get to the next tape.